going, everybody? So we've got a fun review today as we're finally talking some Madam Web on the channel, the latest movie in the Sony Spider-Man universe that they're trying to craft that ironically does not have Spider-Man in it, just Spider-Man characters, whatever it takes to continue to retain the rights to Spider-Man. When Cassandra Webb develops the power to see the future, she's forced to confront revelations about her past and forge a relationship with three young women bound for powerful destinies if all of them can survive a deadly present. I've been a massive Spider-Man fan my entire life. He's my favorite superhero of all time. I read the comic books, video games, you name it. Ironically, this is the first appearance of Madam Web. But I can't deny the fact that it's been a pretty rough stretch as far as these Sony Marvel movies that have Spider-Man characters in them, from the Venom films, Morbius, and now Madam Web, who I always thought was a pretty cool character whenever she did pop up, but I never expected her to lead an entire movie. But thanks to the Frankensteining of Sony, we now have a weird hodgepodge of Madam Web origin to go along with this execution of many other characters in the Spider-Verse, and like you would expect, it's an absolute mess. It almost was impressive at just how badly this film fails at being a vaguely competent superhero film. Which, dare I say, I think this might be a little bit worse than even Morbius. There certainly are a few interesting ideas buried deep in the script of Madam Web as far as Cassandra coming into her powers, her clairvoyance, and utilizing it when the situation calls for it, while also dealing with things like destiny and the way that Anya, Julia, and Maddie factor into the narrative of the story. However, the major negative to Madam Web is everything is so poorly written, it's tough to get engaged with what's going on any type of serious level. Almost intentionally, considering the movie is set in the early 2000s, it feels like it's trying right down to the tone to capture the essence of those rough early to mid 2000s superhero films. From the look of the film, the extremely cringe dialogue exchanges, some of which I can't deny I did have some fun with, particularly Dakota Johnson has some pretty solid jokes here. On top of probably one of my favorite moments, all of them dancing together to a Britney Spears song, one that very appropriately came out in 2003. All around, the majority of the story structure here on this adventure is weird, and how it decides to comb through the history of a lot of these different characters, which the majority of which, if you're a big Spider-Man fan, you're going to be scratching your head at the weird changes they decided to make. And that aspect is something that kind of goes hand in hand with those early 2000s superhero films where they were just changing things around because they did not care about the source material at all. Though the overwhelming majority of the issues I have with Madam Web come down to a storytelling perspective, it's a true shame that you have all of these different stars playing these iconic characters in the Spider-Man universe, and almost all of them give mediocre to just bad performances. Now, some of that for sure can be attributed to the poor material that they're working with, considering at certain points in the story, it does feel like there is some level of chemistry building, but it never fully gets there, often wasting a lot of them. By default, I guess Dakota Johnson gives the best performance out of the bunch. Both her and Sydney Sweeney, I think, are the ones I enjoyed the most out of the cast. It's just unfortunate that the story doesn't give them a lot to do, so the majority of the movie they just come across as extremely bland characters and gives you no real reason to be invested in them besides the fact that you know that they're going to inevitably be spider people. This is another thing I was underwhelmed by, is the inclusion of Maddie, Anya, and Julia. Of course, this is a Madam Web movie, so you're expecting that Madam Web is the star of the show, which she for sure is, but the big selling point here is the fact that you have all of these spider people on screen in live action for the very first time. Yet they completely waste them. When we do finally start getting some big action set pieces, almost all of them are poorly done. Choppy editing, mediocre spider action. Don't expect going into Madam Web to see a lot of them in the spider costumes, which is a true shame because mostly I like the costumes here, especially the ones for Julia Carpenter. Even Madam Web's costume is pretty cool now that they've officially made her a spider person. This type of compliment I cannot give to someone like Ezekiel Sims though, because that costume is horrific to look at. It is a true eyesore, and Ezekiel Sims by and large as a character, this version of him that's completely different from the comic book version, he was a terrible villain. I almost started to feel kind of bad for the actor that portrays Ezekiel Sims because you can tell he's trying to do his best with the material given to him. The material he have just does not work in the context of Madam Web as this sort of Terminator Spider-Man. I don't want to get too comic book nerdy as far as how different the characters are between the comic book version and this version in Madam Web, but they feel like completely different people. If anything, there's a Spider-Man villain that makes way more sense in the context context of the story. His name is Moreland. His entire deal is that he hunts down a multitude of different spider people, and if I had to guess, he's probably owned by Sony anyways. I mean, sure, Moreland doesn't have a Spider-Man costume or anything, but neither did Ezekiel Sims. It absolutely feels like Sony has no idea what to do because they have no idea who's gonna be Spider-Man in this universe. They're just doing weird stuff, like making evil Spider-Man here with Ezekiel Sims. Lately, people have been coming out and saying that Madam Web is in its own universe now, and it's not connected to everything else going on, which I don't really buy based on what we saw within the story. It's set in the past, so they have a lot of leeway as far as connecting it to other stuff in the world. All I do know is by the conclusion of this story where we leave off with these characters, I don't think I'd be that invested in seeing a Madam Web 2 or almost any of these characters returning, to be honest. Honestly, I probably couldn't care less about the majority of the cast in this. Out of all of these different Sony Marvel films that don't have Spider-Man in them, Madam Web is probably the one that most feels like a disservice if you are a Spider-Man fan. Even if it's just a regular film, if you're going into this not being super invested in superheroes or Spider-Man. I know there are a lot of people out there that have not been a big fan of what the MCU has been doing in recent years, feeling like the quality and all their projects have been going down, which some of the cases I do agree with. Almost everything the MCU has put out in the last couple of years is superior to what you would see in Madam Web. I mean, it's pretty sad that I think that Morbius probably objectively is a better made film, which is kind of fitting that some of the writers on Morbius are the same on Madam Web, but it's true. It seems like the quality is going to continue to decrease, which is really unfortunate when you think of the fact that there's going to be 3 of these Sony Marvel films this year. Madam Web was just the first one. We have Kraven later this year, and then we end off the year with Venom 3. So let's just hope that Madam Web somehow in some way is the worst of the 3. With how rough 2024 has been for the movies this year, I am begging for Doom Part 2 at this point. Either way, if you are going to check out Madam Web or Valentine's Day, make sure you share your thoughts down below. How'd you feel about Madam Web? Did you like the movie? Did you not like the movie? How are you feeling about the future of this Sony Spider-Man character universe that does not have Spider-Man in it for some reason? Either way, make sure you share all your thoughts down below about the film. As part of the fun is having that conversation with you guys in the comment section down below. Thank you guys, as always, for videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure to like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so you update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. For the next time, see you guys later.